Reading children's books has been a search of self-discovery for children's author and mum of twin boys, Katie Flaxman. We delve deep into stereotypes, postnatal depression, the importance of vulnerability, the reality of raising twins, and how to help children unearth a love for literature. Katie has lots of inspiring book recommendations at Katie Flaxman Writes if you would like to reach out. And stay tuned to see how bad a 2 a.m. wake-up call gets in her house. I am Sam, and you are listening to Surviving Parenthood, a parenting podcast. Welcome, Katie Flaxman. Thank you for joining us here today.
Hello.
Hello. So, you have twin boys, aged 6, is that right?
I do, yeah.
You do. So, I want to ask a lot about all things twin, but first of all, to break the ice, I need you to tell me about a parenting moment or fail from the past in an attempt to make my parenting existence more bearable and more valuable.
Okay.
Go.
This was hard because I feel like my whole parenting journey is a fail. So I had to narrow it down to one. But this one is when the boys were pre-walking, so somewhere between like 9 and 12 months. It was the middle of the night. They woke up, and generally, if both woke up, both me and my other half got up, because it is usually a two-person job. He went down the stairs first to their room, opened the door, and my son just launched a poo. Okay. Just launched it at his face. And so he opened the door, and it was just like bounced off his chest, which was amazing. And I was stood behind him and thought this was absolutely hilarious. But evidently it turned out that it was me that put the nappy on, that he got off, and there was like poo around the clock, poo on the child, poo on Ed. And it was like, would you like the poo or the child? Clear up. So that was my parenting fail, but it wasn't my consequence. I didn't have to deal with the consequences of my parenting fail. So
I think that's okay. I think that is quite genuinely the best parenting fail. And even though I was aware before the chat that it might contain poo, I still didn't quite brace myself for the launching of the poo.
It was amazing. We still talk about it. We still talk about it regularly. But,
I love
the
this.
2 a.m. poo incident.
Forever known as the 2 a.m. poo incident. I love this. Okay, so as this episode will hopefully be coming out around World Book Day next year, we're recording this sort of winter time, aren't we? I would like to ask about your wonderful new audiobook, Learning to Fly, which are mindfulness stories for sleep, calm, and self-esteem. And I know this series focuses on things like vulnerability, courage, patience. I want to hear about the book. I want to hear about the inspiration behind the book. And I want to know, have the boys been listening?
Oh, so that's like 3 questions.
Yeah, I did tell you that they usually come in 3 parts, my questions. I like things in 3. I feel like it's a really, there's just something very melodic about a 3.
No, you're not wrong.
Okay.
Well, so it's actually 2 books now. So I divided it up because it was 9 short stories. So in the end, I decided that 9 was too many on one audiobook. So I've got one with 5 and one with 4, but they're actually a similar length. And I think the idea behind it was really that I listened to quite a lot of meditation. I thought that would be helpful for the boys. Particularly one of them finds it useful to do breathing strategies and things to help him calm down. And what I was finding was they weren't like fully engaged with kind of the whole guided meditation concept. And I thought, well, why not stories? Why not make meditations more narrative? I'm sure I'm not breaking the mold. I'm sure these already exist, but I felt that it would be really nice for meditations to be narrative and stories, as well as kind of instilling moral values, moral messages, and helping sleep, calm. They're the things that we want to help our children with, aren't they? Like especially at bedtime. So I thought about all the kind of things that I would like for the boys to have. I want them to be able to be vulnerable. I think that's something that boys especially aren't encouraged in society to be, to have courage, to be brave, to be kind. And I thought about all those things, and I created a story kind of around each of them, with hopefully that message. And I based it in a woodland, in nature. Like my whole life centres around nature, really. And so you'll always find in my stories that nature comes up as a real kind of intrinsic theme. And I think it's also something children can relate to. So that's kind of where I came at. The boys listen to Calm every single night before bed.
Really?
Yeah, every single night. In fact, they know it word for word now. So when it's on, they can speak it at the same time. So, and they will listen to other ones sometimes, but that's by miles their favourite.
And how do they get along with your voice? Do they, that's mummy, or do they sort of separate the two?
Do you know, it's funny because sometimes they'll be like, oh, this is you, mummy. And then the other morning, one of them came down and he said, he said something about Calm. And I said, oh, yeah, no, that's me. And he said, no, it's not. And I said, yeah, it is. And he was like, oh. So I think because you put your special meditation voice on, they don't always connect the dots, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, my two actually don't like listening to me at all. They're quite literally the worst. They are the worst critics, honestly. It's just ridiculous. But Poppy my eldest brought home a resource from Twinkl the other day, and it was a mindfulness resource. It wasn't one of the ones I actually created, but it was very similar. And I was like, mummy does this when she works. Like, mummy actually makes these things that you're bringing home and doing in the classroom. And she was like, no, I didn't know that. It's like, I've been working there for so many months. But I think sometimes they have such an attachment to you as a mum in the environment that they're in, and then you as a mum in the workplace. But I just thought that was quite amusing. So that's the book. And I know that, that's on Audible, isn't it? Just to let everyone know. Yeah. I would like to know about your love of children's books in general. I know that when I was reading through, you said something like you've learned a lot about what it's like to be human by reading children's books and your love for them. So tell me a bit about your passion for that literature.
I think for me it stems all the way back to childhood. Like for me, children's books were just where I found like hope, solace, freedom. Like they were a huge escapism for me as a child, and I've just always carried that into adulthood. And I think revisiting them, I've actually always read children's books. Weirdly, I obviously read grown-up books as well sometimes, but I've always read children's books, middle grade stuff, young adult stuff, picture books, and having children then kind of brought me back to them in a big way. And we have a lot of books, and we do a lot of library visits as well. I was actually quite thrilled when I moved up here, up to Suffolk. I've just moved to Suffolk from Essex, and they said I could have 20 books on a library card instead of 14. And I was like, what? I'm like winning at life here.
That literally blew your mind.
It literally blew my mind, yes. And she was like, not many people actually take all 20. It's all right, I'll bring them back and get more.
Are you good at honouring the deadline for bringing back the library books? Most
of the time, yes. I've got to say, like school holidays and things, sometimes things get away from me, but yes, most of the time. But I think when the boys were born and I was brought back to children's books, I just realised like how much you can learn from them as a grown up. And there's been so many times where I've stepped back from a book and been like, wow, that was amazing, or laughed and found it funny. And I think they just distill these really massive ideas into just really simple terms. And I think we need that as grown-ups as well as children need it. And books now are just so much better than they were when I was a child, and so much more diverse, and just with so many better messages. And it's interesting reading the books I read as a child now and going, oh, like that's where that idea comes from. And even ones I really, really loved. And I think so it's just rediscovering that joy I think that I had as a child, and that's why I love them so much, really.
Oh, that's so lovely. Which book are you reading at the moment?
Oh, I never just have one.
Do you not?
No. I've got a whole pile of pitch books that I've got on the go with the boys.
Yeah.
I'm reading a YA novel called Jay's Gay Agenda, which is an LGBTQ book. And then I've also got I'm just about to finish Phone Talk by Candy Gourlay, which is a middle grade novel as well. So I've got loads on the go.
Are you the same when you read literature yourself? Do you always sort of flip between two, or do you just focus on that one book?
Oh no, these are my books that I'm reading. Those are my books. Yeah, the boys, we just probably read about 5 books a day, whatever they choose. They just...
Oh, so those books are your books. Sorry, I thought when you said about the LGBTQI book, I was thinking, oh, that sounds amazing. I thought you were reading that to your boys.
No, that's a YA one, so it's a little bit adult for them.
Oh, YA, yes, you did say that. Yeah, I sort of feel a bit like that I like to just sort of, you've bought me a couple of books I just fit in and out of, actually. I quite like the diversity of it. So let's talk more about the boys. Let's talk about the specific twin dynamic. We've not had a guest on with twins so far, so I want to get involved with that. I want to ask you, first of all, how do you navigate raising them as individuals? I'm going to try and do a 3-part. How do you navigate raising them as individuals, sort of encouraging their individuality? Do you avoid twin stereotypes? Do you find that, you come up against people making obvious stereotypes? And or do you educate if they do? Tell me about that. Individuality.
Oh, it's hard to be the representative of multiple parents, like parents of multiple.
Just your experience.
It's like the twin thing is amazing. Like it's a massive blessing. I've got to say, it was really hard when they were born. Like really, those early days are just like brutal. I think I'm maybe quite chilled about it. Like I know loads of parents of multiples, and they all have quite different views on what they think is right. I mean, my boys are actually identical, and I think that adds like an extra dynamic because they look the same to other people. They don't look the same to me. So they tend to get treated more as one than lots of multiples I know where they don't look the same, and people just refer to them as brothers or brothers and sisters or whatever. For me, they are so different as human beings that you only have to get to know them for almost like half an hour and you're like, whoa, they're really, really different. And I think it's kind of, you almost don't need to educate people, because that's the question people ask. Are they similar? Like, are they different? Are they really different? And I'm like, yeah, no, they are really different, like different human beings. And I sometimes find it quite baffling because they've got like the same DNA, the same, think about nature, nurture.
Yeah.
They've got the same. And so they're so different as people.
Yeah.
I think like individuality is really important to me. When they were little, I used to dress them the same, and there's a lot of controversy in the twin world about dressing your children the same. But I just thought, oh, you've got identical twins, it's got to be done, right? And because again, they were so different, it didn't really. I don't think it took away from them being individuals for me. But now, like since they've been able to choose their own clothes, basically, they just choose their own clothes, and they don't. Very rarely do they dress the same. But I can't just buy one or something. They both want the same. They have to have the same thing. They just don't wear it at the same time or use it at the same time. And now I really encourage them to try to do things separately and try to do things that they enjoy. And I think since moving, they actually did after school clubs on their own for the first time. And I kind of explained, you know, that the other one's not going to be there. And that was really scary for them, but they really enjoyed it. And I think that was a real turning point for them where because they've always been in the same class, they've always been at small village schools. And that's been really great because they've always had that support from each other. But that kind of having that space that was just theirs, I think really helped them to see that they don't have to do everything the same, and they don't have to do things with each other if it's not their thing. And that's been really, really good. But it's a slow process, I think, because it's scary when you've always had this person next to you doing things. I think it's scary to stand out there on your own. And I don't know if that's scarier than, you know, if you're not a multiple, because you're probably doing that, you know, if you think of your two, they've probably done that from when they're very little. They've been going to groups and clubs and things on their own, but the boys have never done that. So yeah, it's tricky. I've forgotten what the other part of your question was.
No, I think you've literally answered it all. You've encapsulated it perfectly. I think the other thing I was going to ask, which I think was the third part, is how do you come up against other people making stereotypes? Does that sort of bother you? Is it something that you feel like you need to have a discussion about when it comes to certain folk, or is it just something that you can just let lie?
The thing is, for me, the stereotypes that bother me don't tend to be twin related. Okay. I think people like to talk about twins. They like to talk about multiples. They like to ask questions about them. I think there's been a few things at school where I have one child who's very gregarious and outgoing, social, makes very easy social connections, very popular, and the other child not so much. And so people, I think, assume they're both fine when sometimes they aren't, and I'm like, they're not the same child. Like, you need to look at them as individuals. But mostly the things that bug me are actually, I think, things that affect other parents as well. You know, things about I've brought the boys up to be I don't know how you would describe it. I suppose quite gender neutral. Like we don't. Toys are toys, books are books. You know, they like things that are pink and sparkly. They like dinosaurs, and that sort of stuff comes up a lot for them. And I use a lot of books and things to help support them with it. But I think it's really difficult when mummy's saying one thing and it feels like everyone else in their life is saying something different. And that's the stuff I find more challenging and that I address more. I would say the multiple thing is quite an easy thing to talk about and navigate. And I think also because people are really interested by it and don't there's not a stigma or a barrier to talking about it. I think people want to talk about it. So
that's cool. So can I just pick up on something you said there at the beginning when you mentioned in the early days, I think you might have used the adjective brutal. Could you, I mean, I'm making light of it, but I do know that it was extremely hard. Could you tell me a little bit about the early days with twins, what that was like for you?
For me personally,
for you,
really, 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 really hard. And it was, it feels like you know, everyone around you is like, wow, you're so blessed. I love twins. Aren't they amazing? And I'm like, yeah, they are. But I'm not sleeping. I'm not, you know, I look at people even now with their one baby that they're feeding and looking at them, and then baby falls asleep in their arms, and then they sit there and they stare at this baby. And that just wasn't my experience. I was like, I've got to feed this one, and that one's crying whilst I'm feeding this one, so this isn't an enjoyable experience. Then I've got to try and win this one whilst I've got to feed this one, and I can do that at the same time, or then I can do one then the other. And it was very much the same at night. You know, one would sleep, then one would wake. And for me, I mean, mental health issues, postnatal depression is much higher in parents of multiples, and for me that was a problem. I definitely had postnatal depression, and it was just really, really, really hard in the early days. And I think that's something that people don't talk about enough, and people feel like because it is a blessing to have twins and it is this amazing thing and you're part of this amazing like club of multiples, you don't feel like you can say, actually, I'm not enjoying it. And actually, there's a little bit of me that's jealous that you just have one and you get to like strap it on you and go for a walk. And I can't do that because they're too heavy. So yeah, those early days were really hard. But it's funny because people still say that to me sometimes. And I look at them now and there's always that thing of, am I giving them enough? Have they got enough individual time? You know, am I treating them enough as individuals and all of that? But actually having two of the same developmental age once they get older, I think is easier. Like, I look at people who have a 3-year-old and a baby, and I just think, like, those two hugely different developmental needs at the same time just is really, really hard. And now I'm like, okay, well, at least the things we do are kind of gauged to them, and they can play together, and you know, they've got this like best friend in each other. And I feel like as they've got bigger, it's definitely been easier, like much easier.
So when you did have it really hard going, and you said there that you think that you suffered from postnatal depression, was that something that was diagnosed, or is that something that you just sort of retrospectively believe that you had?
I worked in mental health at the time, and it took me a long time, I think, to realise how bad it was and how bad I was feeling. And because I worked in mental health, I had a lot of friends around me who were therapists, some of which were perinatal mental health therapists, and that helped me a lot. And it was a couple of them who said to me, look, do you think you need to talk to someone? And I think it was at that point that I thought, you know what, this isn't normal. And actually that helped me, just that knowing, like, this isn't normal, how I feel isn't normal, actually was like quite a breakthrough moment for me. And I didn't get help, and I, looking back, wish I had. And also looking back, wish I'd known about a lot of organisations that I know about now. There's an organisation called Pandas, which is like a perinatal mental health charity, and they do just amazing work. And even their stuff now has helped me, like, reflecting back on it. But I'm a member of the Twins Trust, and they were really helpful at the time. But I wish I'd been braver to speak out more and say more about it and kind of get proper help. But I think there's a lot of shame around it, isn't there? And there's a lot of, even for someone like me who knows and understood it and has worked with people with postnatal depression, it was.
I think there is a lot of shame around it, and I really appreciate you talking about it so openly and going that little bit deeper with me there. And I didn't know about Pandas, and that's an amazing tip for anyone listening that is struggling with twins. While we're on the subject of tips, I'm wondering, just going back to the book side of things, if you had any tips when it comes to how to engage children with books, with children's literature, because I know that there might be some parents out there that are struggling with that. Do you have any tips on that subject, or?
Like loads.
Tell me. Tell me your top 3 as we're on a roll with 3.
Okay, so ones that I find really hard, because I love books so much. I love children so much. Ones I find hard are let them read what they love, not what you think they should. Like, if your child doesn't like books or doesn't like reading, I think if they can go to the library and be like, you know, Mummy, I want to read this, and you look at it and you're like, oh, really? Like, really? Like, I think it helps kids to have ownership and feel like they chose it, and we do that. So I like to guide them with certain books because I feel like they've learned a lot about being human from books that maybe I have chosen, and that I might choose books that are for things that are going on in their life at that particular moment. But if we go to the library, I'll say, right, everyone can have 5 books each. So we've got 15 books and I get to choose 5 of them. So that means I get to choose 5 where I'm guiding them. And then when we read them at home, we're like, oh, whose book was this? Whose book was this? Oh, this was Mummy's book. Oh, this was, you know, whoever's book. And they really love that. They really love that. And they love that ownership. And I think don't underestimate the power of non-fiction as well. I've got one child who just loves nature, he loves animals, and he loves non-fiction books. I think as a parent, again, you open this book and it's just like so many words and so much, and you're thinking this is not a bedtime book. Like, but actually children are just naturally curious. They're really curious and they love taking in information. They love learning facts and figures, and I think if you can just, you know, say we'll read 1 page and engage in discussion with them about it, they just love it. Like, they love it, and that helps them see that you get knowledge from books and they don't look at it as learning.
Amazing.
I think another thing I absolutely hate when they do, but is really good for them, is let them interrupt you. I'm like reading a story and I'm like in a flow and I'm like, but actually they're like, oh, did you see that there was that bird in the corner over there? Mummy, did you see that? Or like, oh, what's going to happen next? I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I don't know if you've noticed kids love questions in books. And if there's a question and you can just pause and go, what do you think the answer is? Like, that really engages children with the story, even though I'm like in my flow. I've got my voice going and I just want to turn the page. And I think the main thing I think with my kids is enjoy it, because I love books, and I'm convinced that's why they love it. Because when I pick up a book, I get really excited about it and I really get into it and I spend that time enjoying it. And so if you can even pretend to enjoy it, which will help if you choose some books that you want to read as a grown-up, you know, all of those things will help. So it's not easy, because I'm lucky because they love books, and I know a lot of kids who just won't engage with them. So
but those are your top tips. I need to work on the last thing you said there, because my youngest, I mean, I don't mind the odd question, but when it's every other word, I'm like, I just, especially maybe because we read before bedtime, and I'm like, okay, you get like 20 minutes each. And if like, you know, not even a quarter of the way through the book, and I know that he wants to get to the end, because that's sort of his signal of, okay, Mummy's now leaving, good night. And then every other word is a question. I'm like, I do struggle with wanting to get into the flow and enjoy the book and it be relaxing, but then him being so sparked off, because he is deeply curious, so he does, you know, just engage with absolutely everything with quite a lot of sort of laser focus and intensity. Oh, maybe that's a bit like me. You know, when you have a moment of awareness, maybe that's why I'm really intense. No, that is a good tip. I do need to allow him space to ask questions.
We also have bedtime books. So, because we read, so
this is different. Okay.
We have books, like sometimes they'll pick up a book and it will be like an encyclopedia, and I'll be like, that's not a bedtime book, like that's a daytime book. And so bedtime books typically are stories, not always, but typically are stories, and almost always are fairly short.
Okay.
Because by that point in the day, I have to recognise that I've had enough. And
absolutely,
it's my time coming up, and I want to read them a story, and that's more of a process of helping them get to sleep. Whereas for me, the stories that we read, I might read something after school where I can sit there and it doesn't really matter if we don't finish it, and it doesn't really matter if they want to talk about it. And so they know this, like they'll pick something up and they'll go, "Is this a bedtime book?" And I'll be like, or whatever. So I get that feeling completely as a grown-up.
Okay, so bedtime books, daytime books, that is quite literally gold, and I'm going to take that with me, and I'm now going to divide up my book pile.
or bedtime half an hour earlier. Sometimes if they're desperate to read a book, I'm like, okay, we can read that, but we have to start bedtime early, and they're like, okay.
And I'm also going to make a trip to the library, because I have been neglecting that because I'm so awful with returning the books. And I feel like I've got...
It's okay.
I know, but I feel like I've got a terrible reputation in the local library for being that parent, but I'm sure no one really cares. Okay, thank you so much. I think I'm going to have to let you go, even though that was lovely and I loved talking to you, and you're so full of very cool, inspirational ideas. And thank you for joining me here today, Katie.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Bye.